Behind the perfectly polished royal facade lies a woman who once sprinted barefoot through muddy fields, her designer dress hiked up around her knees, chasing after something that mattered more than protocol. This is the side of Catherine, Princess of Wales, that the world rarely sees. The fierce competitor who refuses to lose, the protective mother who breaks rules when her children need her, and the determined woman who fought her way from middle-class roots to the throne's doorstep, one calculated step at a time. What drives someone to abandon royal etiquette and run barefoot? The answer reveals everything about who Kate really is when the cameras stop rolling and the crown comes off. This is her story, raw, real, and completely unexpected. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Marlborough College as 17-year-old Catherine Middleton laced up her hockey boots with the same methodical precision she applied to everything in her life. Her teammates were already warming up on the field, their voices carrying across the crisp autumn air, but Kate remained focused on her ritual. Left boot, right boot, shin guards adjusted just so. She had learned early that success lived in the details. Catherine Elizabeth Middleton had arrived at this moment through a combination of careful planning and fierce determination that would later define her approach to everything, including her pursuit of a prince. Born into a middle-class family in Reading, she was neither aristocrat nor commoner, but something more complex, a product of her mother's relentless ambition and her own quiet strength. Her mother, Carol, had built party pieces from their kitchen table into a million-pound business through sheer force of will. The company supplied party decorations and accessories, but more than that, it supplied the Middleton family with the financial means to climb social ladders that had previously seemed unreachable. Carol understood that in Britain, education was currency, and she was determined to buy her children the best. Kate's childhood was structured around achievement. Piano lessons, tennis coaching, skiing trips to France. Each activity carefully chosen to build not just skills, but the kind of confidence that came from mastering difficult things. Her father, Michael, provided the steady foundation while Carol pushed the boundaries. It was a partnership that produced children who understood both humility and ambition. At Marlborough College, one of England's most prestigious boarding schools, Kate learned to navigate the complex social hierarchies that would later serve her well in royal circles. She was popular but not showy, athletic but not obsessive, pretty but not intimidating to other girls. She had discovered the power of being underestimated. The hockey field was where her competitive nature truly emerged. Kate played center forward with a style that combined grace with ruthless efficiency. She could weave through defenders with balletic precision, then drive the ball toward goal with shocking force. Her teammates learned to stay out of her way when that particular look crossed her face, the one that said losing was not an option. Kate never lost her temper on the field, remembered her teammate Sarah Henderson years later. But you could see something change in her eyes when the game was on the line. She became someone else entirely. That competitive fire burned brightest during her final year at Marlborough, when the school's first team was competing for the regional championship. Kate had been appointed captain, a role she approached with typical thoroughness. She studied game footage, analyzed opponent strategies, and pushed her teammates through grueling practice sessions that left everyone exhausted but better prepared. The championship game came down to a penalty corner in the final minutes. Kate's team was down by 1 goal, and everything they had worked for hung in the balance. As the ball was struck toward the goal, Kate found herself in a crowd of players, sticks clashing, bodies pressing. The ball deflected off someone's stick and rolled toward the sideline. Without thinking, Kate sprinted after it, her cleats pounding against the turf. The ball was rolling toward the boundary line, and if it crossed, their chance would be over. She could hear the referee's whistle building in his chest, could feel the seconds ticking away. In that moment, something primal took over. Kate duffed the ball, her stick extended, her body horizontal in the air. She connected just before the boundary, scooping the ball back into play with a motion that defied physics. But her momentum carried her over the line and into a muddy patch beyond the field. She landed hard, her uniform soaked, her carefully braided hair coming undone. The crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted. Kate's save had kept the play alive, and her teammate had scored the equalizing goal seconds later. They went on to win in overtime, but what people remembered was Kate's dive, the moment when proper form gave way to pure determination. As she walked off the field that day, mud streaking her face, her mother watched from the stands with a mixture of pride and concern. Carol recognized something in her daughter's expression that was both admirable and dangerous, the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. That night, as Kate cleaned the mud from her cleats, she reflected on the game and what it had taught her. Success, she understood, wasn't just about talent or preparation. It was about being willing to abandon dignity when the moment demanded it. It was about wanting something more than the person next to you wanted it. This lesson would serve her well in the years to come, though she couldn't know it then. She was already planning her next move, university, where she intended to study art history at a prestigious institution. Her parents had suggested several options, but Kate had her eye on one school in particular, the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. She had read that Prince William was considering St. Andrews, though that wasn't why she was interested. Or at least, that's what she told herself. The truth was more complicated. Like her mother, Kate understood that proximity to power was its own kind of currency. If she happened to end up at the same university as the future king, well, that would simply be a fortunate coincidence. The application process was rigorous, but Kate approached it with the same methodical preparation she brought to everything else. She researched the professors, studied the curriculum, and crafted her personal statement with care. When her acceptance letter arrived, she felt the same satisfaction she had experienced scoring the winning goal, the reward that came from careful planning meeting fierce execution. Her last summer, before university, was spent preparing for the transition. She worked at her parents' company, learning the business from the ground up. She watched Carol negotiate with suppliers, charm difficult customers, and manage the complex logistics of a growing enterprise. These weren't lessons in party planning. They were lessons in power, influence, and the art of making people want to help you succeed. Kate also spent time reading about royal protocol, though she would never admit this to anyone. She studied how previous commoners had navigated their way into royal circles, noting their successes and failures. She learned about Sarah Ferguson's early popularity and later scandals, Diana's charisma and tragic end, and the quiet dignity of the Queen Mother. Each story offered lessons about the delicate balance between authenticity and appropriateness. As autumn approached, Kate felt ready for whatever St. Andrews might bring. She had learned to win at hockey through preparation and determination. She had learned to navigate social hierarchies through careful observation and strategic positioning. She had learned from her mother that ambition was nothing to be ashamed of, as long as you were smart about pursuing it. The morning she left for university, her parents drove her to Scotland in their Range Rover, the backpack packed with everything she would need for her new life. As they crossed the border into Scotland, Kate felt the familiar flutter of anticipation that came before any important competition. She was entering a new game now, one with higher stakes than any hockey match. She didn't know that within weeks, she would be living in the same dormitory as the future King of England. She didn't know that a fashion show would change the trajectory of her life, or that a simple friendship would evolve into something much more complex. She didn't know that her fierce competitive streak would be both her greatest asset and her biggest challenge in the years to come. What she did know, with absolute certainty, was that she was ready to fight for whatever she wanted. And if that fight required her to run barefoot through mud again, she would do it without hesitation. The game was just beginning. The cobblestone streets of St. Andrews were slick with October rain as Kate Middleton made her way to her art history seminar, her umbrella fighting against the Scottish wind. 6 weeks into her first term at university, she had settled into a comfortable routine that balanced academic work with social positioning. Her room in St. Salvator's Hall was modest but strategically located, and she had already identified the students worth knowing. Prince William lived just down the hall, though Kate had been careful not to appear too interested in this fact. She had observed him from a distance during the first few weeks, noting his attempts to blend in with ordinary students. He wore baseball caps pulled low over his face, chose seats in the back of lecture halls, and traveled with a discreet security detail that tried to look like mature students. Kate's approach to the prince was masterfully indirect. She befriended his roommates first, becoming someone they genuinely enjoyed having around. She joined the same clubs he did, but never immediately after him. She studied his schedule without appearing to, positioning herself to be naturally in the same places at the same times. The breakthrough came during a charity fashion show organized by the university. Kate had volunteered to model, partly because she enjoyed fashion and partly because she knew William would be in the audience. The show was raising money for charity, and several students had been recruited to walk the runway in everything from formal wear to swimwear. Kate had been assigned a sheer dress by designer Charlotte Todd, a provocative piece that transformed her from approachable classmate into stunning woman. As she prepared backstage, her heart raced with the same intensity she had felt before important hockey matches. This was another kind of competition, and the stakes were higher than ever. When she stepped onto the runway that night, something shifted in the room's energy. The dress clung to her figure in ways that her usual university clothes never revealed, and her confident stride spoke of someone comfortable in her own skin. In the audience, Prince William's attention was completely captured for the first time. "Wow, Kate's hot," he whispered to his friend Fergus Boyd, who later recounted the moment to several people. It was the beginning of everything that would follow. But Kate's strategy went beyond that single moment. She understood that capturing William's attention was only the first step. Keeping it would require much more sophisticated maneuvering. Over the following weeks, she deployed a combination of availability and aloofness that had served her well throughout her romantic history. She made herself a constant presence in William's social circle without being obvious about it. When he went to the local pub with friends, Kate would arrive an hour later with her own group. When he played football on the university grounds, she would happen to be nearby, studying or meeting friends. She became part of the background of his life before becoming part of the foreground. Their first real conversation happened during a late-night study session in the library. Kate had positioned herself at a table visible from William's usual spot, surrounded by art history books and looking appropriately stressed about an upcoming exam. When William approached to ask about borrowing a book, she looked up with perfectly timed surprise. "Oh, hi, William," she said, as if she hadn't noticed him sitting 20 feet away for the past 2 hours. "Art history as well. I didn't know you were taking Professor Richardson's course." The conversation that followed was carefully choreographed on Kate's part, though William never suspected. She had researched his interests, knew about his gap year experiences, and had prepared thoughtful questions about his perspective on contemporary art. She presented herself as intellectually curious, but not intimidating, supportive, but not fawning. What William didn't know was that Kate had spent considerable time understanding his romantic history and learning from his previous relationships. She studied how other women had succeeded or failed in capturing his interest. She noted that he was drawn to confidence, but put off by aggressive pursuit. He liked women who seemed to have their own lives and interests who didn't appear to need him. So Kate built a version of herself that was irresistible to him specifically. She emphasized her athletic background, knowing he was competitive. She showcased her sense of humor, understanding that he valued laughter above almost everything else. She demonstrated loyalty to friends, recognizing that trust was paramount for someone in his position. Their friendship developed gradually over the spring term. Kate was always available when William needed someone to talk to about the pressures of his position, but she never pushed for more than he was willing to give. She listened without judgment when he complained about media attention or family expectations. She provided a safe space where he could be just William, not the future king. The turning point came during a weekend ski trip to the French Alps. Kate had arranged to be invited through mutual friends, ensuring that she would be part of the group without appearing to chase William specifically. She was an accomplished skier, thanks to her family's annual trips to Verbier, and she used this to her advantage. On the slopes, Kate's competitive nature emerged in full force. She challenged William to race down increasingly difficult runs, her technique polished and fearless. When he pushed himself to keep up with her, she rewarded him with genuine admiration for his skills. When he struggled on a particularly challenging slope, she offered help without making him feel incompetent. One afternoon, as they reached the bottom of a black diamond run, William found himself genuinely impressed by Kate's combination of skill and grace under pressure. She had navigated the most difficult sections with the same calm determination he had seen in professional athletes. When she turned to him with windswept hair and bright cheeks, something clicked into place. That evening, over dinner in a cozy mountain restaurant, their dynamic shifted subtly but significantly. William began to see Kate not just as a friend or a beautiful woman, but as a potential partner. She had proven herself capable of keeping up with his lifestyle, both literally and figuratively. She understood the unique pressures he faced and seemed genuinely interested in supporting him through them. Kate recognized the change immediately. After months of careful positioning, she had reached the next level of the game. But she also understood that this was where many women before her had made critical mistakes. The transition from friend to girlfriend was treacherous territory for someone in William's position. Instead of pushing for definition or exclusivity, Kate maintained the same strategic patience that had brought her this far. She continued to date other people occasionally, ensuring that William never felt pressured or trapped. She supported his friendships with other women, demonstrating that she wasn't possessive or insecure. She made it clear that she valued their connection, but didn't need it to define her. This approach worked perfectly with William's psychology. Having grown up watching his parents' troubled marriage and his father's complicated relationships, he was naturally wary of women who seemed too eager to claim him. Kate's apparent independence made her safe to pursue. Their relationship evolved throughout their second year at St. Andrews. They became study partners, workout companions, and each other's default date for university events. Kate met his friends and family gradually, always making excellent impressions through her combination of warmth and appropriate deference. When William finally asked her to be his girlfriend officially, it felt like a natural progression rather than a dramatic change. Kate accepted with just the right amount of enthusiasm, pleased but not overwhelming, committed but not clingy. She had waited nearly 2 years for this moment, and she intended to make sure she never gave him reason to regret it. But even as their relationship deepened, Kate never forgot that she was competing in a game with very specific rules. She studied how other royal girlfriends had succeeded or failed. She learned from Camilla Parker Bowles's patient persistence and Diana's early mistakes. She understood that becoming William's girlfriend was just another step toward her ultimate goal. Late at night, when William was asleep beside her in their shared flat off campus, Kate would sometimes lie awake thinking about the future. She knew that loving a future king was more complicated than loving an ordinary man. Every decision would be scrutinized, every mistake magnified. The woman who married William would need to be perfect in ways that most people couldn't imagine. But Kate had been preparing for this challenge her entire life, even before she understood what she was preparing for. Her mother's lessons in social climbing, her experiences navigating elite institutions, her competitive spirit, everything had been building toward this moment. She thought about that hockey game at Marlborough when she had thrown herself in the mud to save a ball that was rolling out of bounds. She had sacrificed dignity for victory then, and she would do it again now. The stakes were higher, the competition fiercer, but the principle remained the same. Kate Middleton was prepared to do whatever it took to win, and she was just getting started. The flash of paparazzi cameras had become as familiar to Kate as breathing by the spring of 2007. For years into her relationship with Prince William, she had mastered the art of walking through a storm of photographers while maintaining perfect posture and an enigmatic half-smile. But today, as she left her London flat on her way to work, something felt different about the intensity of their pursuit. Kate, are you and William getting engaged?" The questions came from every direction as she navigated the narrow sidewalk toward her car. She had learned never to respond directly to these inquiries, but today the desperation in the photographers' voices suggested they knew something she didn't. The truth was that Kate had been wondering the same thing. After graduating from St. Andrews in 2005, she and William had settled into what outsiders assumed was a comfortable pattern leading toward marriage. She had taken a job as an accessories buyer for the clothing chain Jigsaw, a position that perfectly balanced professional respectability with the flexibility required for royal duties. William was training at Sandhurst Military Academy, preparing for his role as a future king. On the surface, everything appeared to be progressing according to plan. Kate attended royal functions as William's girlfriend, charming his family and the press with her grace and apparent normalcy. She had been photographed with the Queen, shared private jokes with Prince Harry, and won over even the most skeptical royal watchers with her understated elegance. But beneath this polished exterior, Kate was fighting battles that no one could see. The pressure of dating the future king was unlike anything she had experienced, even after years of careful preparation. Every outfit was analyzed, every expression scrutinized for hidden meaning. She couldn't buy groceries or meet friends for coffee without becoming front-page news. More challenging was the growing sense that she was living in relationship limbo. While other women her age were getting engaged and married, Kate remained in a state of perpetual serious girlfriend status. She watched William's contemporaries settle down with wives and start families, while her own future remained frustratingly undefined. The worst part was that she couldn't discuss these concerns with anyone. Her friends, while supportive, couldn't understand the unique pressures she faced. Her family, despite their love and encouragement, had no experience with royal protocol or media scrutiny. Even William himself seemed oblivious to her growing frustration, apparently comfortable with their undefined status. Kate had learned to compartmentalize these feelings, focusing instead on perfecting her public persona. She studied footage of other royal women, noting what worked and what didn't. She practiced her posture, her wave, her ability to look engaged during boring official events. She was building the skills she would need as a future princess, even though no one had officially asked her to take on that role. The breaking point came during a family ski vacation in Switzerland that March. Kate and William had been photographed together on the slopes, looking happy and relaxed. But privately, their relationship was more strained than it had ever been. William was dealing with intense pressure about his future military service and royal duties, while Kate was struggling with the uncertainty of her own position. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in their rented chalet, the conversation that had been building for months finally erupted. Kate had been reading a magazine article speculating about their potential engagement when William made an offhand comment about not being ready for marriage. "When will you be ready?" Kate asked, her voice carefully controlled, but her eyes betraying her frustration. "We've been together for 6 years, William. I'm 25 years old. My friends are getting married and having children. What are we doing?" The fight that followed was unlike any they had experienced before. William, feeling cornered and overwhelmed by his own responsibilities, accused Kate of pressuring him. Kate, finally, letting her guard down, expressed her frustration with being in relationship limbo. They said things that couldn't be taken back, exposed insecurities that had been carefully hidden. When Kate returned to London, she felt emotionally drained but also strangely liberated. For the first time in years, she had been completely honest about her feelings. She had stopped playing the patient, understanding girlfriend, and had demanded the clarity she deserved. William's response came 2 weeks later in the form of a phone call that Kate had been both expecting and dreading. They needed to take a break, he said. The pressure was too much, and he needed space to figure out what he wanted. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, but it changed everything. The news of their split became global headlines within hours. Kate found herself at the center of a media firestorm that made their previous coverage seem gentle by comparison. Photographers camped outside her flat, tabloids dissected every aspect of their relationship, and royal commentators debated whether this was a temporary separation or a permanent split. For the first few days, Kate remained hidden in her apartment, devastated by the end of a relationship that had defined her entire adult life. She had invested everything in William and their future together. Now she faced the possibility that all her careful planning and strategic positioning had been for nothing. But gradually, something unexpected happened. As the initial shock wore off, Kate began to remember who she had been before William. She reconnected with old friends who had been somewhat neglected during her royal courtship. She threw herself into her work with renewed energy, taking on new responsibilities at Jigsaw and exploring other career opportunities. Most importantly, she rediscovered the competitive spirit that had driven her throughout her life. This setback was just another kind of game, and Kate had never accepted defeat easily. If William needed space, she would give it to him. But she would use that space to become an even more attractive prospect than before. Kate's strategy during their separation was masterful in its apparent effortlessness. Instead of pining publicly or trying to win William back directly, she focused on building a life that looked fulfilling and independent. She was photographed at art galleries, charity events, and social gatherings, always looking confident and happy. She dated other men casually, ensuring that William understood he wasn't her only option. The media narrative gradually shifted from poor Kate, dumped by the prince, to Kate Middleton, living her best life. She had turned what could have been a humiliating rejection into a demonstration of her resilience and desirability. She was playing the longest game of her life, and she was winning. Meanwhile, William was discovering that life without Kate wasn't as liberating as he had expected. His other relationships felt shallow compared to what they had shared. He missed her counsel during difficult decisions, her steadying presence during public events, her ability to make him laugh even in stressful situations. The turning point came during a mutual friend's wedding that summer. Kate attended looking absolutely stunning in an emerald green dress that perfectly showcased her figure and confidence. She danced with other men, laughed genuinely at their jokes, and seemed to be having the time of her life. William watched from across the room, realizing that he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. Their reconciliation began with a phone call that William initiated. He suggested they meet for a drink, ostensibly to clear the air, but really because he couldn't stop thinking about her. Kate agreed, but on her terms. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. When they met at a quiet pub in London, Kate was warm but not eager. She listened as William explained his fears about commitment and his concerns about the pressures of royal life. She sympathized, but didn't immediately forgive. She had learned too much about her own worth during their separation to simply fall back into old patterns. "I need to know that this is real, William," she told him as they walked through Hyde Park after their drink. "I can't go through this uncertainty again. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly." The conversation that followed was the most honest they had ever had. William admitted that he had taken her for granted, that he had been scared of the responsibility that came with marrying her. Kate acknowledged that she had perhaps been too patient, too willing to accept an undefined situation. They decided to rebuild their relationship from the ground up, with new understanding of what each needed from the other. William would need to be more decisive about their future, while Kate would need to maintain some of the independence she had rediscovered during their separation. As autumn arrived, they were publicly reconciled, but privately they were navigating a new dynamic. Kate was no longer the eager girlfriend waiting for William to decide her fate. She had become a partner with her own demands and expectations. The balance of power had shifted, and both of them knew it. The media noticed the change too. Kate seemed more confident, more self-assured. She carried herself with the authority of someone who knew her worth. When photographers called out to her, she met their gaze directly instead of looking away. She had stopped asking for permission to exist in William's world and had started claiming her place in it. Late one evening, as they lay in bed together in William's cottage, Kate reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The separation had been painful, but it had also been necessary. She had learned that she couldn't sacrifice herself completely for love, even love of a future king. But she had also learned that her feelings for William were deeper than strategic positioning or social climbing. She genuinely cared for him as a person, flaws and all. The question now was whether they could build a marriage based on mutual respect rather than her patient endurance of his uncertainty. As William's breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep beside her, Kate allowed herself to imagine their future together. She pictured herself in a wedding dress, standing beside him at Westminster Abbey. She saw herself raising their children, supporting him through the challenges of kingship, becoming the kind of queen that Britain needed. But she also remembered the lesson of her separation. She would never again sacrifice her own identity for anyone else's comfort. If William wanted to marry her, he would be getting all of her, the patient supporter and the fierce competitor, the diplomatic princess, and the woman who would run barefoot through mud to win. The game was far from over, but Kate was playing on her own terms now, and that made all the difference. The engagement ring felt heavier than Kate had expected as she twisted it nervously around her finger. Sitting in the opulent drawing room of Clarence's house, waiting for the official announcement interview to begin, she tried to calm the butterflies that had taken residence in her stomach. After 9 years of dating Prince William, this moment should have felt like a natural progression. Instead, it felt like stepping onto a stage where one wrong move could bring the curtain crashing down. It was November 2010, and the engagement had been announced just hours earlier. The ring, Diana's famous sapphire surrounded by diamonds, had been William's idea, a gesture meant to include his late mother in their celebration. Kate understood the symbolism, but she also felt the weight of comparison that would now follow her everywhere. She wasn't just marrying William anymore. She was stepping into Diana's shadow. The interview with Tom Bradby from ITN was supposed to be straightforward. A few gentle questions about their relationship, their engagement, their future plans. Kate had prepared for weeks, practicing answers that would sound spontaneous while revealing nothing too personal. She had learned to speak in the careful language of royalty, where every word was measured and nothing was ever quite what it seemed. "Were you surprised by the proposal?" Bradby asked, his tone professionally warm. Kate's smile was perfect, genuine enough to seem real, controlled enough to maintain dignity. "It was a total shock," she said, though of course it hadn't been. They had discussed marriage extensively over the past year, particularly after their reconciliation. The proposal itself, during a romantic trip to Kenya, had been carefully planned by William with input from his private secretary. What Kate couldn't say was how relieved she had felt when William finally got down on one knee beside a crystal-clear lake in the shadow of Mount Kenya. After years of uncertainty and a devastating breakup, she had finally achieved what she had been working toward since that first meeting at St. Andrews. But relief wasn't the emotion expected from a fairy tale princess, so she spoke instead about surprise and joy. "You were training to be a search and rescue pilot," Bradby said to William. "How difficult was it to balance that with your relationship?" This was safer territory. They had rehearsed this answer, emphasizing William's commitment to service and Kate's understanding of his duties. What they didn't mention was the strain his military career had placed on their relationship, the long separations and canceled plans, Kate's growing frustration with being relegated to second place behind his helicopter. The interview concluded with questions about their wedding plans. Kate spoke about wanting a balance between the pageantry expected for a royal wedding and the personal touches that would make it meaningful to them. She mentioned wanting to include both their families, though she carefully avoided discussing the complex negotiations that were already underway about guest lists and protocol. When the cameras stopped rolling, Kate felt the familiar mixture of exhaustion and anxiety that followed any public appearance. She had performed well, saying all the right things in all the right ways. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The wedding itself would be scrutinized by millions of people around the world, and Every detail would be analyzed for deeper meaning. The months that followed were a whirlwind of preparation that tested every skill Kate had developed over the years. She worked with wedding planners, designers, and protocol experts to create an event that would satisfy the competing demands of tradition, politics, and personal preference. She sat for countless fittings for her wedding dress, a creation by Sarah Burton at Alexander McQueen that needed to be kept absolutely secret until the day itself. But the real challenge wasn't the logistics of the wedding. It was a transformation Kate was undergoing from private person to public figure. She began working with the palace's media team, learning how to handle the increased scrutiny that would follow their marriage. She studied footage of other royal brides, noting their successes and failures, their ability to project the right combination of accessibility and dignity. The pressure was unlike anything Kate had experienced, even during the most intense periods of her relationship with William. Every outfit was analyzed, every public appearance dissected. She was no longer just William's girlfriend. She was a future member of the royal family, with all the expectations and restrictions that entailed. Kate's mother, Carol, became her closest advisor during this period. Having built her own business from nothing, Carol understood better than anyone the importance of controlling one's image and message. She helped Kate navigate the complex world of royal protocol while maintaining some connection to her own identity and values. "Remember who you are," Carol would tell her daughter during their private conversations. "They're not just getting William. They're getting you, and you have value independent of him." This advice became crucial as Kate faced increasing criticism from some quarters about her middle-class background and perceived lack of substantial accomplishments. Certain members of the aristocracy whispered that she wasn't suitable for William, that she lacked the breeding and background necessary for royal life. The press, while generally positive, occasionally published articles questioning whether she was ready for the pressures ahead. Kate's response to this criticism revealed the steel beneath her diplomatic exterior. Rather than defensively trying to prove her worthiness, she simply continued to excel at everything she attempted. She threw herself into her royal training with the same determination she had once brought to hockey. She learned languages, studied constitutional history, and practiced the complex etiquette that governed royal life. Most importantly, she developed her own vision for what kind of royal she wanted to be. She studied successful royal women from around the world, noting how they had balanced tradition with modernity, formality with accessibility. She began to understand that her middle-class background could be an asset rather than a liability, allowing her to connect with ordinary people in ways that born aristocrats sometimes couldn't. The night before the wedding, Kate lay awake in the Goring Hotel, her last night as a private citizen. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle of Westminster Abbey watched by billions of people around the world. She would promise to love, honor, and obey a man who would one day be king. She would become Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, and begin a life that would be lived almost entirely in public. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From that determined young woman on the hockey field at Marlborough to the strategic university student who had positioned herself in William's orbit. She had played the longest game of her life, and she had won. But she also understood that marriage to William wasn't the end of the game. It was just the beginning of a new and more complex one. The wedding day itself was a masterpiece of choreographed perfection. Kate's entrance into Westminster Abbey in her flowing ivory gown created one of the most iconic images of the 21st century. Her composure during the ceremony was flawless, her vows spoken clearly and confidently. When William struggled briefly with the wedding ring, she steadied him with a small smile that millions of viewers interpreted as loving reassurance. But what impressed royal watchers most was Kate's ability to seem both regal and relatable throughout the day. During the carriage ride back to Buckingham Palace, she waved to crowds with genuine warmth. At the reception, she moved gracefully between conversations with heads of state and childhood friends from Marlborough. She had mastered the art of being simultaneously royal and human. The kiss on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, Actually, 2 kisses after the crowd demanded an encore sealed her transformation from Kate Middleton to the Duchess of Cambridge. In that moment, watched by millions around the world, she had officially entered the royal family and begun her life as a future queen. Later that evening, at the private reception for family and close friends, Kate finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She danced with her father, laughed with her sister Pippa, and shared quiet moments with William away from the cameras and formal protocol. This was the woman behind the Duchess, someone who still valued family, friendship, and genuine connection despite the grand role she had accepted. But even as she celebrated, Kate remained aware that the real test was just beginning. Being a royal bride was one thing. Being a working member of the royal family was something entirely different. She would need to establish her own charitable interests, support William in his duties, and eventually navigate the complex challenges of motherhood in the public eye. The honeymoon in the Seychelles provided a brief respite from public scrutiny, though even there they were pursued by long-lens photographers hoping for exclusive images. When they returned to London, Kate began her official royal duties with characteristic thoroughness and preparation. Her first solo engagement was with a children's charity, a choice that reflected her interest in child development and education. She spent hours preparing, visiting the organization beforehand to understand their work, meeting with staff and volunteers to learn about the challenges they faced. When the official visit took place, she was knowledgeable, engaged, and genuinely interested in the work being done. This pattern would define Kate's approach to royal duties throughout her early years of marriage. She never appeared to be simply going through the motions or fulfilling obligations reluctantly. Instead, she brought the same competitive determination to royal work that she had once brought to sports. She wanted to excel, to make a genuine difference, to prove that she deserved the platform she had been given. The public response to the new Duchess was overwhelmingly positive. Her fashion choices were copied around the world, creating what became known as the Kate effect. More importantly, she seemed to represent a modernization of the monarchy, someone who could bridge the gap between traditional royal values and contemporary expectations. But privately, Kate was still adjusting to the reality of her new life. The constant security presence, the inability to go anywhere without extensive planning, the knowledge that every public moment was being recorded and analyzed, these aspects of royal life required significant psychological adjustment. She found solace in her relationship with William, which had deepened and matured through their engagement and wedding. They had survived the uncertainty of their early years and the pressure of their public courtship. Now they were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through the unique challenges of royal life. As their first wedding anniversary approached, Kate reflected on the transformation she had undergone. She had successfully completed her transition from commoner to royal, but she had also maintained her core identity. She was still the competitive woman who had once thrown herself into the mud to save a hockey ball, but now she channeled that determination into serving her country and supporting her husband. The little girl who had once dreamed of being a princess had achieved her goal, but she had discovered that real princess work was far more complex and demanding than any fairy tale suggested. It required intelligence, stamina, diplomatic skill, and an almost superhuman ability to remain gracious under pressure. Kate had proven she possessed all these qualities. The question now was how she would use them to shape her role and influence as a future queen. The foundation had been laid, but the real building work was just beginning. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Anmer Hall as Catherine, Princess of Wales, laced up her running shoes with the same methodical precision she had once applied to her hockey boots. It was early 2023, and at 41, she had spent more than a decade as a working royal, transforming from the nervous new Duchess into one of the monarchy's most valued members. But today would test every skill she had developed, every lesson she had learned about grace under pressure. The previous evening, she had received a call from her private secretary about a crisis developing at her children's school. A group of photographers had somehow gained access to the grounds during a sports day, attempting to capture exclusive images of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. The children were safe, but they were shaken, and Kate's maternal instincts had overridden every protocol she had been taught. What followed became the story that would define her legacy. The moment when the perfectly controlled Princess of Wales revealed the fierce mother beneath the royal exterior. When her security team had initially advised against her personally handling the situation, Kate had done something unprecedented. She had overruled them entirely. "Those are my children," she had said, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even her longtime staff. "I'm going to them now." The 40-minute drive to Lambert School had felt like hours. Kate sat in the back of her Range Rover, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios while her security detail coordinated with local police. She had faced many challenges as a royal: difficult diplomatic situations, intense media scrutiny, personal attacks from critics. But nothing had prepared her for the possibility of her children being genuinely frightened. When she arrived at the school, Kate could see immediately that the situation was more serious than anyone had initially understood. The photographers hadn't just taken pictures. They had actively pursued the children during their sports activities, calling out their names, and try to provoke reactions. Her 9-year-old son George had been visibly upset, while 6-year-old Charlotte had burst into tears when strange men with cameras had followed her relay race. Kate's transformation in that moment was total and instantaneous. The diplomatic princess disappeared, replaced by a mother whose children had been threatened. She didn't wait for security clearance or protocol guidance. She simply ran, kicking off her heels as she crossed the playing field. Kate sprinted barefoot across the grass toward her children with an urgency that shocked everyone present. Her carefully styled hair came loose from its pins, her designer dress caught on a fence as she climbed through a gap to reach them faster, and mud splattered across her stockings as she dropped to her knees to gather all 3 children in her arms. "It's okay," she whispered fiercely, holding them tight. "Mummy's here. No one is going to bother you anymore." What happened next became the subject of intense speculation and eventual legend within royal circles. Kate stood up, still holding Louis while George and Charlotte pressed against her sides, and faced the remaining photographers who were still attempting to capture the scene. For perhaps the first time in her royal career, she allowed her full emotions to show on her face. "You will stop this now," she said, her voice carrying across the field with shocking intensity. "These are children, my children, and if you don't leave immediately, I will personally ensure that you face every legal consequence available." The photographers, apparently taken aback by the transformation of the usually composed princess into a fierce protector, began to retreat. But Kate wasn't finished. Still barefoot, still disheveled, she followed them to ensure they left the school grounds entirely. The headmaster, who had witnessed the entire scene, later described it as seeing the real Catherine emerge. He noted that while she had always been a devoted mother during school visits, something fundamental had shifted in that moment. She wasn't the Princess of Wales anymore, he said privately to close friends. She was just a mother protecting her cubs. The incident remained largely out of the public eye initially, though rumors began circulating almost immediately. Kate's staff worked to control the narrative, emphasizing that the princess had simply visited the school to check on her children after a minor disruption. But those who had witnessed her barefoot sprint across the muddy field knew they had seen something remarkable. The real story emerged weeks later during a private dinner party at Windsor Castle. Kate was seated next to a veteran royal correspondent who had covered the family for decades. As the evening progressed, and the atmosphere became more relaxed, the journalist asked Kate about her approach to balancing royal duties with motherhood. "People always ask me about the challenges of royal life," Kate said, swirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "The protocol, the scrutiny, the pressure to be perfect all the time. And yes, those things are difficult. But the hardest part is watching your children grow up in a fishbowl, knowing that their every mistake will be front-page news, that they'll never have the luxury of privacy that other children take for granted." She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. I've spent years learning to be diplomatic, to find the perfect balance between accessibility and dignity. I've mastered the art of saying nothing while appearing to say everything. But when it comes to my children's well-being, I discover I have limits. The journalist leaned forward, sensing a rare moment of genuine revelation. What kind of limits? Kate's smile was enigmatic, but her eyes were steel. Let's just say that if someone threatens my children's safety or happiness, they'll discover a side of me that has nothing to do with royal protocol. I ran barefoot once, and I'd do it again without hesitation. The comment became legendary, though it took years for the full context to be understood. Royal biographers would later identify this as the moment when Kate fully claimed her power within the institution, establishing herself not just as William's supportive wife or the Queen's dutiful daughter-in-law, but as a force to be reckoned with in her own right. The incident at Lambrook also marked a turning point in how Kate approached her royal role more broadly. She had always been thorough and committed, but now there was an edge to her work that hadn't been there before. She began taking on more controversial issues, speaking more directly about problems she observed, and showing less patience for bureaucratic obstacles that prevented progress on issues she cared about. Her charitable work evolved to become more focused and impactful. Instead of simply lending her name and presence to worthy causes, she began driving initiatives forward with the same determination she had shown on that muddy school field. When organizations moved too slowly on projects involving children's mental health or early childhood development, Kate would intervene personally, using her influence to accelerate progress. Staff members began to notice changes in how she operated. She became more direct in meetings, less willing to accept vague promises or bureaucratic delays. When a major children's hospital faced budget cuts that would affect their mental health services, Kate didn't just express concern. She worked behind the scenes to secure alternative funding, leveraging her relationships with wealthy donors and corporate sponsors. She's always been determined, one longtime aide observed privately, but something shifted after that incident at school. She stopped asking permission and started taking action. This evolution in Kate's approach to royal work reflected a deeper transformation in how she understood her own power and position. For years, she had focused on fitting in, on proving herself worthy of her role, on meeting everyone else's expectations. The moment she ran barefoot across that field marked the end of that phase and the beginning of something new. She began speaking more candidly in interviews about the challenges of royal motherhood, acknowledging the unique pressures her children faced while also expressing her determination to protect them. She talked openly about the difficulty of maintaining family privacy while fulfilling public duties, striking a balance that was both relatable and dignified. The public response to this more assertive version of Kate was overwhelmingly positive. People appreciated her honesty about the challenges of her role and admired her fierce protectiveness of her children. The image of the princess running barefoot to reach her children became a symbol of authentic motherhood that transcended class and social boundaries. But, perhaps most importantly, the incident revealed something fundamental about Kate's character that had been carefully controlled and managed throughout her royal career. Beneath the polish and protocol was someone whose core values remained unchanged from the girl who had once thrown herself in a mud to save a hockey ball. As Kate reflected on her journey from middle-class girl to future queen, she realized that her greatest strength had always been her refusal to accept defeat when something truly mattered to her. She had channeled that competitive spirit into winning William's heart, mastering royal protocol, and building a successful public role. But the most important battle had been learning when to abandon dignity in favor of authenticity. The woman who had once calculated every move to capture a prince had evolved into someone who understood that real power came not from perfect control, but from knowing when to let go of control entirely. She had learned that being royal didn't mean being perfect. It meant being genuine in moments that mattered most. Years later, when her children were older and the crisis at Lambrook had become family lore, Kate would tell them the story of that day as a lesson about priorities. There will always be rules and expectations, she would say. But there are also moments when you have to decide what matters most. That day, what mattered most was reaching you. The little girl who had dreamed of being a princess had achieved that goal, but she had discovered something more valuable along the way. She had learned that true strength wasn't about maintaining perfect composure under all circumstances. Sometimes it was about being willing to run barefoot through mud when the people you loved needed you most. In the end, that moment of raw, protective love had defined her reign more than any carefully orchestrated public appearance or diplomatic triumph. It had shown the world who Catherine really was beneath all the titles and protocol, a mother, a fighter, and someone who understood that the most important victories were often won not in the spotlight, but in the mud.